Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and welcome to another video where I'm doing a user-requested video, actually. We are doing a Baneblade tier list, or rather Baneblade Variants tier list, of all the plastic Baneblades, as well as the resin one from Forge World, the Stormblade, if I'm not mistaken. All these names are a little confusing, but I think I've got them down. So first up, we have the Baneblade. The Baneblade is the jack of all trades. It comes in the standard Baneblade pattern, so it has a hull-mounted Demolisher cannon. Hold on, before we go any further, let me cover the things. Lord Solar to give them take aim, Tech Priest to give them invulnerable save and healing them, and that's pretty much all we need to worry about buffs, as well as the fact that they all have the same spawn sins and all come with a hull-mounted Heavy Bolter or Heavy Flamer. I will be considering this as the Heavy Bolter, as the Heavy Flamer doesn't have much purpose, as Titanic units can't use Overwatch. Back to where we were. Baneblade. Jack of all trades. Its main gun is solid enough. It's a Strength 12 AP2 Damage 3 weapon with Blast. It's a rather solid profile for attacking most targets in the game, though it won't be supremely effective against things like Land Raiders or Knights, given that it's only wounding them on 4s, but it does have 3d6 shots, so pretty solid. It comes with a coaxial autocannon, which really isn't worth that much, but it might kill a couple Space Marines. Then the hull-mounted Demolisher cannon actually really helps with punching up against the tougher things like Knights and Land Raiders, because it is Strength 14, obviously. Very solid, but you do have to get in pretty close to use that, 24 inches, and it doesn't sync up the best with the Baneblade cannon, which is a 72-inch range weapon. Overall, I think the Baneblade's pretty solid. It's one of the more expensive variants. I believe it's 480 points, if I'm not mistaken. And for that, I'm going to put the Baneblade probably right at the top of B or the bottom of A. I'm not sure where it'll land at the end, because like B is like the... I'm actually going to put it in A, because I think it's a very solid unit. It's not too specified as some of the other ones are, and it's not too flimsy, or not flimsy, not too like much of a pea shooter like some of them are. So the Banehammer, actually, you know what? I'm just going to double check with the Banehammer. The Banehammer is a transport with a tremor cannon, which is actually a pretty solid general purpose profile. It's d6 plus 2 damage, if I'm not mistaken, and 2d6 plus 3 shots with blast. That's strength 12 AP2, or strength 14 AP2. All of these are very much blending together in my mind. But overall, the Banehammer trades out the Demolisher cannon for a slightly upgunned main profile. Or upgunned isn't necessarily the right term. It's pretty much the same as the Baneblade cannon, but it does have, I'd say on average, slightly more shots, given the 2d6 plus 3. And it's not 2d6, it's not d6 plus 2. It's another Banehammer variant in its entirety. Overall, I'd say the Banehammer is one of the more weak Baneblade variants. It's not the most expensive, if I'm not mistaken. It's 455, I want to say, points-wise. Or 450, it's right in that range. It's nothing special, though. And losing the Demolisher cannon for a gun that's more of a side grade to the Baneblade cannon, I think puts this pretty firmly in D tier. The Banesword. The Banesword, now I actually just did a video on the Banesword. The Banesword is my personal favorite of the Jesus, I'm having a stroke. Is my personal favorite favorite one, as it's the one I own. Though I don't think it's necessarily the all-time best. I think it's very solid and a very worthy contender to the Baneblade, mainly because it swaps out the Demolisher cannon for the Quake cannon, which is a much more, which is an upgunned version of the Baneblade cannon. It's strength 14, AP 3, and damage 4, which is super good for killing most things. And its special rule, I didn't mention special rules. Baneblade gives cover to things behind it, which is solid and lets you do arrowhead formations with things like Lehman Russ. And the Banehammer has a Battle Shock test, if I'm not mistaken, which isn't what I would call very good, though it is not just for the target, it's for everything within 3 inches of the target. Back to the Banesword. Banesword makes things explode on a 3+ with their Deadly Demise, which in certain matchups will be super impactful and others less so. But I think the Banesword's main cannon is effective against all targets, that it's not the end of the world, and it is, it's very solid. A very solid profile all around, super long range. Overall, I really like the Banesword. I'd rate it about the same as the Baneblade, but I can't put their images together. I'd say they're different and up to personal preference. Personally, I prefer the Banesword, though I understand why people would prefer the Baneblade. The next one is the Doomhammer. So the Doomhammer is a transport model. There's 3 models: Baneblade, Siege, and Transport. Doomhammer falls into transport, as it can transport things and has a solid enough transportation, though I don't think that's what I'd mainly use it for. The main attraction of the Doomhammer is its very powerful magma cannon. The magma cannon is a super powerful melta gun, a 24-inch range, melta 6, damage d6, the AP4. Now, the reason that it's so good, obviously, if it had to get within 12 inches, it would be very close range and very much at risk of getting charged. But the magma cannon always counts monsters and vehicles within being half range. So 24-inch range, it's doing d6 plus 6 damage to vehicles. This is a super big punch. And for a fairly middle-of-the-road cost, I'd say the Doomhammer is actually really solid. And you could fill it up with almost any kind of infantry. If I'm not mistaken, it's 26 slots. Ogren take up 3 slots apiece. So you could have this thing moving forward, and then just on the mid-board, just disgorge a couple squads of Imperial Guardsmen, which would, of course, be very solid. Ooh, excuse me. I do like the Doomhammer. I think out of the transports, it's probably my favorite. I'm going to put it probably in low A tier, is where the Doomhammer is going to end up. I think it's very solid overall. It's not... though it doesn't have quite as much flexibility, which is one of the things I'm going to dock it points for, which might actually end up bumping it down to B tier, as its main gun is really only effective against vehicles and monsters, where some of the others are effective against vehicles and monsters, but also other things. Granted, the Doomhammer does enough vehicle damage that I think it is very much worth it in a lot of senses. Next up, the Hellhammer. So the Hellhammer has a Nova Cannon, which is already a bad start. Its main gun is only Strength 7, AP 1, and Damage 2. It's fine against infantry, 46 attacks. I'm just going to say it. This thing doesn't do enough damage. It's too expensive, even though it's one of the cheaper variants, it's just too expensive. It has to rely on its Demolisher Cannon, which isn't a bad weapon profile, but you can get a Demolisher Cannon with heavy bolters for a lot cheaper than a tank commander. And the Hellhammer's ability is fairly whatever. It just doesn't take the penalty to hit roll when it shoots into close combat. I think it's easily the worst variant of the lot of them. Next up, we have the Shadowsword, the Doomhammer's bigger cousin. So the Shadowsword is insane, is how I like to put it. D3 plus 1 attacks at strength 24, AP 5, and damage 12. When it targets vehicles, it gets devastating wounds. Now, needless to say, this is an insanely devastating attack. But, of course, you pay for that in D3 plus 1 attacks. At minimum, you're getting 2. Granted, 2 shots is enough to destroy any vehicle in the game, with, I think, the exception of Dominus Pattern Knights, I think it is, the big ones with the guns. Granted, 12 damage a shot means any mainline battle tank is getting one-tapped by this thing. And even things like Land Raiders and Questoris Knights are going to be wishing they weren't born when they get hit with this thing and then the last cannons to back it up. The devastating wound rule is definitely a scary thought. Obviously, doing 12 damage without being able to stop it is immense, and it does defeat its one main problem, which is invulnerable saves. And that's why I think the Shadowsword, despite being the cheapest, or second cheapest, Baneblade variant, is unfortunately not necessarily the strongest. It's not as bad as the Hellhammer, and I wouldn't say it's as bad as the Banehammer either, but it's probably going to end up in lower B tier. The Stormlord. The Stormlord is the last of our transports, if I'm not mistaken. This one is equipped with the Titan weapon, the Vulcan Mega Bolter. 20 shots, sustained hits 1, damage, strength 6, AP 1, damage 2. Now, this is one of the cheaper ones, and it does kind of fall into Hellhammer category of being a little expensive for that profile. However, where I think the Stormlord pulls ahead of the Hellhammer is its ability. It has the largest transport capacity, 30 models, firing deck 24, if I'm not mistaken. And its special rule allows for some interesting plays at the very least, in theory. So you could load this thing up with 10 Scions and a command squad, jump them out every turn after moving, unload firepower, and then at the end of your opponent's movement phase, so long as they're not in engagement range, they can jump back inside. Now this, of course, keeps them safe from shooting and melee, and as we know, the Baneblade profile is rather tough. Toughness 13, 2 plus save, 24 wounds, very solid. And especially with a Tech Priest running up behind him, giving them giving them an invulnerable save. Now, the Stormlord itself, I'd say, actually isn't really that worthy of buffing. Its Mega Bolter's good at killing infantry, and while you would want to give it buffs if you can through, say, a Vox network, I wouldn't have Lord Solar hugging this thing like I would, say, the Banesword, Baneblade, or Doomhammer, or the Shadowsword for that matter. I think the Stormlord isn't as exemplary as some of the others, just given the fact that it has a Vulcan Mega Bolter, which is just a gassed-up heavy bolter as its main profile. I'm going to put it in high C tier mainly for its potential in theory with the likes of Scions or Khazarkin, or even more traditional things, or maybe not traditional, more standard things, big death core units with people attached. What I'm saying is it's a useful taxi for damage combos, which for the Imperial Guard, that involve infantry at least, are usually very fragile. So having this huge shell to chew through is very solid, and there are some armies that will just really struggle to kill these things. Anyways, Stormlord, I'm going to put it above the Banehammer, as I prefer its special rule, even though I think the Banehammer cannon is better. I don't think the Banehammer has enough in that regard. Like, its damage still isn't exemplary enough to pull ahead of the Stormlord's potential. Now, we have the Stormsword. The Stormsword is the most expensive, 495 points, and that's not without reason. Its cannon is strength 16, AP 4, damage d6 plus 2. Let me double check that just to make sure I'm not spreading false information. I was correct. It is strength 16, d6 plus 6 attacks, with AP 4, damage d6 plus 2. Blast ignores cover, so cover won't save you. This thing is the most powerful main cannon on a Baneblade variant. This is a siege chassis, so no hull-mounted demolisher cannon. And its special rule is situationally super powerful. Now, I say that because the way its special rule works is you select your target, blast them with your big gun. Can't remember its name for some reason. And every unit nearby, I believe within 3 inches, you roll a d6 for each of them, and then on a 5+, they each suffer d3 mortal wounds, including the unit you targeted. So this can, against certain armies, I'd say this has an inverse relation of power to the amount of model counts. So as model count goes up, not inverse, directly related. As model count goes up, this thing's power goes up. Because if you shoot this into the heart of an army that's really dense, like Imperial Guard, you could be showering a lot of mortal wounds everywhere. And even aside from that, the Stormsword's cannon is just super powerful. It's really, really powerful. Strength 16 means it's wounding everything on the game on 3s or 2s. AP 4 means you're only getting invulnerable saves most of the time. And D6 plus 2 damage is really solid. You're going to be averaging about 5 damage a shots, and D6 plus 6 shots is not bad. With Blast means it's not horrible against infantry. I would say the Stormsword is probably the best out of the Baneblades because it does, I'd say, not necessarily like the most damage, but its weapon takes buffs the best, as well as the fact that it is, in general, the most flexible. It has a lot of potential, and for its points cost, it's the most points intensive. So you'd have to take that into account. But I would say I'd probably call it the best Baneblade variant, just because its gun is so general purpose, and it's not that much more expensive than 2 and 3 in the Banesword and the Baneblade. It's only 15 more points than either of them. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, for a whole 80 points less, we have the Stormblade, the Forge World plasma-toting siege variant of a Baneblade. So this thing kind of falls into Hellhammer tier, where its plasma blast gun is not the most general purpose. It's only strength 10 when you're overcharging, and with that, it's not the most effective against super heavy targets. Now, that's not to say it's a bad profile, but it is slightly let down by its amount of shots. You would expect something that, on a weapon of this class that's only on a huge unit, you'd expect it to be d6 plus 6, 3d6, something like that. It's only d6 plus 3, which isn't great. Still has blast, which is useful. Since it's a siege variant, no demolisher cannon. It does have one unique thing. It can't take a hunter killer missile, which is fine. I mean, it's just a nice little one-shot thing, though those are usually more valuable on cheaper units that you can spam lots of, i.e. Sentinels, Chimeras, etc. The Stormblade as a whole is, I think, just let down by its number of shots. I think if the Plasma Blast Gun had more shots, it would be more valuable. It has only Strength 10, AP 4, and Damage 4. is unfortunately not quite enough for it to compare to a lot of these other ones that are more general purpose. And the main problem there is, again, lack of shots. Both the Banesword and the Baneblade have better profiles with better shots, as well as the fact you don't have to risk hazardous. As if you don't risk hazardous on this thing, it's only strength 9, which means even against Leman Russes, it's going to be wounding them on 5s, which is not great. So I do think the Stormsword's winning trait is how cheap it is. It's 415 points, super cheap for the durability profile, but I don't think that necessarily helps it that much, as its main gun is just, it's so-so. It's not a bad weapon. It's not great either compared to some of the other Titans we have here. I'm going to put him in probably top of C tier. I think it's fine enough. It's not as bad as the Hellhammer's gun, but it's let down by number of shots. If this thing had 3d6 shots, I think it would go up a tier or maybe even 2, because then it would be really efficient at just clearing out elite infantry. It is good at killing Terminators, given the damage 4 and the high AP, but also they have invulnerable saves, which means this thing could bounce pretty easily, which is true of anything, but it's painful when you only have this many shots. Anyway, so this is my final ranking. I do think there's not daylight between the Banesword, Baneblade, and Stormsword. I think they're all very close and all very solid, with the Doomhammer not far behind, and then the rest I'd say are all fine, more fluffy. Shadowsword almost toes into being good enough, but also it's just too specialized, I think. A lot of the other ones are completely confident in killing vehicles, though the Shadowsword, of course, does it with the most style, annihilating them in a single shot. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me what you guys would like to see next. I want to add some more variety to the content on the channel. With Space Marine 2 coming up, I was thinking maybe we could do some Space Marine 1 content. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.